Hello, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The hot and dry conditions are making life tougher for firefighters as the wildfires continue to rage on in many parts of Alberta. As we move closer to a potential WestJet pilot strike on Friday, our country's transport minister says Canadian airline passengers will be protected. And an Alberta teenager landed the role of a lifetime starring in a very special movie. BCN's Angela Stewart has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Our province remains under a provincial state of emergency with 93 wildfires burning in both central and northern Alberta. 27 of them are out of control. There are also 22 states of local emergency and 5 band council resolutions. Around 12,000 evacuees were still out of their homes in various communities. Alberta Public Safety Minister Mike Ellis says the hot and dry conditions are making things challenging for the more than 2,500 firefighters who are battling the blazes.
Our number one priority is that we fight these fires and we deal with the extreme fire conditions in order to protect human lives. It's important that we are all doing our part to support these efforts. That includes being mindful of the fire risks that are upcoming this long weekend as temperatures are expected to climb again. It will be critical to avoid any activities that might start new fires or make the current situation worse. Smoke also continues to be an issue affecting air quality and visibility right throughout Alberta. A special air quality statement remains in place for most of the province, with many areas still sitting above 10 on the air quality index. Keep in mind that a number of 10 or higher indicates extremely poor air quality.
Officials with a town in west central Alberta said it was very emotional to return home close to 2 weeks after an out-of-control wildfire forced residents to flee. Thousands, however, remain on edge as scores of fires continue to rage in many parts of the province.
The fire is still not out, but we can confirm that the danger and risk to the town of Drayton Valley and some of the area around Brazeau County outside the evacuation zone has lessened. There is an area of Brazeau County that is still under an evacuation order, and our fire crews are working diligently to continue the progress to allow those residents to return as soon as possible.
I don't think we'd be here if we didn't have that whole community support together, whether it's the military or firefighters, the municipal staff on both sides of this community here, both the town and the county, the service sector with all their tank trucks and equipment, the farmers out there disking up fields, creating fire breaks and things like that. So it's been a real concerted effort to get this to where we're standing here right now.
As you know, the Alberta election is coming up on May the 29th. Elections can be an exhausting time for candidates, volunteers, and voters. To make matters even more challenging are the Alberta wildfires. Robin Bell is a spokesperson for Elections Alberta. She explained what would happen if voters are unable to make it to the polls due to the wildfires.
So we're looking at what communities have been evacuated. Will they be able to return home before the election? If not, can we still provide voting services in the areas that they've been evacuated to? And if we do need to, we have the option to make an application to the court to delay voting in individual electoral districts. And so then what would happen in that scenario is we would delay voting within 6 months, and it would be similar to a by-election. And the MLA in those regions would be elected in due time.
An Alberta bottle collection agency is collecting donations to help assist in the ongoing wildfire relief efforts in our province. Skip the Depot, which is a facility here in our city, is partnering with the Canadian Red Cross and the Alberta Animal Rescue Crew Society to raise money to help fight the fires. James Trask, the CEO of Skip the Depot, explained what the money will be going towards and how Albertans can help out.
We're encouraging Albertans to donate their bottles and cans to the Red Cross and to Alberta Animal Rescue. And they can do that by downloading the Skip the Depot app from the Google Play or Apple App Store. They can use the promo code 2023 Wildfire. And then all of their donations, all of their deposits from their bottles and cans will go directly to either the Red Cross or Alberta Animal Rescue, and they'll receive a 100% tax receipt back for their donations. So we will come to your house, we'll pick up your bottles and cans, take them back to the depot for you, and in return, you will get a tax receipt for the full value of those containers. And it really helps out these organizations in this time.
According to Trask, Skip the Depot customers have donated close to $2 million to more than 1,700 Alberta charities, nonprofits, and schools. The air seemed to improve a little bit here in Lethbridge. The air quality index at times was around 2 today, which is low risk. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, even though the air quality improved, the special air quality statement is still in effect from Environment Canada?
Yeah, it is, Hal, and it's because air quality and visibility can actually fluctuate over short distances and can vary considerably from hour to hour. So it's hard to predict with any degree of accuracy just how bad it could get over the course of a day. Also, keep in mind that wildfire smoke can be harmful to everyone's health, even at those low concentrations, and that's why the health index risk is still in effect. So we are still looking at local smoke this evening, and Friday we could see a 30% chance of showers with the risk of a thunderstorm along with local smoke. It's going to be a hot one too. 31 degrees is what we're expecting as our high on Friday as our long weekend begins. And Hal, I will be back later in the show to tell you all about the rest of the long weekend.
Looking forward. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Federal Transport Minister Omar Alghabra says he spoke with WestJet and its pilots union to encourage them to find a way to avoid a strike on Friday. He says in the event of a job action, passengers would be protected under the Passengers Bill of Rights.
I am concerned, and I think the last thing that Canadians want is disruption to the travel sector. I've personally been engaged with WestJet and the union, including yesterday. I had conversations with both parties separately, encouraging them to do everything they can to reach a resolution and to avoid disruption. As you know, we have a federal mediator on the ground. Minister of Labour is involved, so I'm concerned and I hope to find a way to reach a resolution. I think for now, what we want to say and do is encourage both parties to find a deal. I do not want to put my finger on the scale. I do not want to preempt the discussions. I want to encourage both parties to find a resolution. Obviously, the airlines have obligations towards their customers. But ultimately, the biggest obligation is to make sure that they deliver the service that they sold to customers. So I hope they avoid disruption.
So far, more than 90 WestJet flights have been canceled as talks continue between WestJet and the pilots union. The National Citizens Inquiry into the way the government's handled the COVID-19 pandemic continued in our nation's capital, in Ottawa. Sheila Annette Lewis recently spoke at the inquiry. She filed a legal challenge against Alberta Health Services, doctors, and a hospital as she was unable to receive a life-saving organ transplant due to her not being wanting to get vaccinated. A panel from the Alberta Court of Appeal ruled against Annette Lewis. She's currently under a court-ordered publication ban on the doctor's identity, the organ, and the location of the transplant program. A teary-eyed Lewis explained her plight to the NCI.
All I wanted to do was be able to breathe. And I did everything that the doctors asked me to do. And I didn't drink, and I didn't smoke, and I didn't do drugs, and I took all my vaccinations. And I ate healthy, I've lost some weight. You know, I did my exercises, I went to the programs. I did everything. All I want to do is live. I want to see my grandbabies raised. But it's not going to happen now. They just won't bend.
Wow. The National Citizens Inquiry will wrap up on Friday in Ottawa for the last day of witness testimonies. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the Trudeau government's carbon tax continues to hurt Canadians. Poilievre says each family pays $1,500 more per year than what they receive back in rebates. He says the pain is just beginning.
Now, we know that the Liberals plan carbon tax 2, which would add an additional 17 cents a litre on top of the first 41 cents, for a total of 61 cents once you add the HST. So there'll be carbon tax 1, then carbon tax 2, and then HST on carbon tax 1 and 2, all of which will cost you 61 cents a litre in higher Trudeau taxes every time you gas up to go to work. And on top of that, it will raise home heating and grocery costs for families by roughly a total of $500 additional dollars. So you take Trudeau's tax number one, Trudeau tax number two, it's about $2,000 in net new costs above and beyond any rebates that you will get back.
The UCP is distancing itself from a candidate in a central Alberta riding following news that one of its candidates said some controversial things about transgender youth. Jennifer Johnson compared transgender children in schools to having feces in food. Now, in a statement, party leader Daniel Smith had this to say. The UCP candidate for Lacombe-Ponoka, Jennifer Johnson, used offensive language and a vile analogy when speaking about the LGBTQ2+ community, for which she has since apologized. Elected officials have a responsibility to represent all communities. The language used by Ms. Johnson regarding children identifying as transgender is simply unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our party or province. I've informed Ms. Johnson that should she win a seat as the UCP candidate, she will not sit as a member of the United Conservative Caucus in the legislature. UCP leader Daniel Smith also commented on a report from the Ethics Commissioner clearing her of any wrongdoing in regards to contacting Crown prosecutors regarding COVID-19 prosecutions. In a release statement, Smith said, "I was gratified to read the Ethics Commissioner's findings confirming that neither I nor anyone in my office tried to or did contact Crown prosecutors regarding any COVID-19 prosecutions. This confirms that the CBC and NDP lied to Albertans for months with false accusations stating that my office and I had done so. Both the CBC and NDP should apologize and withdraw those false accusations immediately and publicly." By the way, the Ethics Commissioner did say, however, in her capacity as Premier, Smith contravened the Conflicts of Interest Act in her interactions with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General in relation to criminal charges faced by Calgary preacher Arthur Pawlowski. Well, it appears as though the gloves are definitely coming off in the fight between the UCP and the NDP. Rachel Notley's party is suggesting that a UCP government would force Albertans to pay out of pocket to see a family physician. Grant Hunter, who's the UCP candidate for Tabor-Warner, says that's simply not true.
It's unfortunate the NDP are actually stooping to that kind of campaign. We will not ever be charging Albertans to go to see their doctor. That will not happen. It's against the law to do that. Our Premier Smith has just signed a $24 billion agreement with the federal government in terms of health transfers back into Alberta, 10-year agreement. Reaffirming our commitment to the Canada Health Act, which says that you cannot do that.
Hunter will also discuss the UCP's solutions for hospital staff shortages in rural Alberta. His full interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our broadcast. Canadian Blood Services announced this week that they are in dire need of 100,000 blood and plasma donors. They say they've been struggling to get new donors since the COVID-19 pandemic.
We've really seen that throughout the pandemic, we did lose a large amount of donors across Canada. We lost about 31,000 donors just through the pandemic. And already with Canadian Blood Services, we rely on a small group of really dedicated donors to kind of sustain the blood and plasma and Canada's Lifeline all across Canada. But what we really need is new donors as well, because across Canada, we require 16,000 whole blood units and 3,000 units of plasma every week.
To be one of the 100,000 new donors, you can download the Give Blood app, visit their website, or simply call 1-888 to donate. A teenager from Vauxhall, Alberta is living out her dream of becoming an actress after having starred in her first major role. A motion picture is being produced telling the true story of Indigenous kids escaping the residential school system here in Canada. In part one of this powerful story, BCN's Angela Stewart caught up with the young girl and her mother to discover how her first acting gig came to be.
The opportunity, as soon as I saw what the story was about, I was like, okay, I really want to be able to be a part of telling the story.
Tucked away in this small southern Alberta community, 16-year-old Kira Vanderploeg's simple lifestyle is all she's ever known. But she's always had a passion to do so much more. She never expected her dream of becoming an actress would ever come true. Until now.
I was like, you know what, I'll do it anyways because there's not a huge chance, and like, oh well, I'll do it. And then that I didn't do the audition for a whole week until I emailed them and they said, oh, well, you have like a day and a half to get your audition in.
Her audition was a success, landing one of the lead roles in the upcoming short film called Little Deer.
Stories of two girls who are escaping the residential school to go home for Christmas. The characters are based on real people. It was intriguing, and it definitely was something that I wanted to be a part of, especially telling the story and being able to just get it out there.
Tagging along for the week-long shoot in Ontario, her mother says she's ecstatic to have been able to see her daughter portray such an important character.
I thought that the movie, being based on a true story, her portraying a residential school survivor, I also helped prepare her too. I think it's going to be deep.
Filming took place at a residential school south of Brantford. Shooting days would often last 10 to 12 hours a day in the middle of March.
One night we got in at 1 a.m. and then another night we got in super early because the weather was bad. And pretty much the days were kind of chaotic, but in like organized chaos.
It was cold, and it was kind of steep and slippery going in the terrain where she was coming out of the trees and a few scenes.
Vanderploeg says her acting days are not done. She's on the hunt for her next role, with the hope of one day turning her small celebrity status into a full-time career. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
What an incredible experience being in a film like that. Now, the reporter who's covering that story is Angela Stewart. Angela, what can we look forward to seeing in part 2 of that story?
Yeah, Hal, so definitely. It was a very enjoyable experience. I had a chance to actually catch up with John Elliott, the director of this film. Now, Elliott will explain the decision behind casting Vanderploeg as one of the lead roles in the film. He also talks about the importance behind making a movie that touches on such an important topic, as well as what viewers can expect when it is released.
Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Angela.
You're welcome.
Many feel that God's Word is invaluable and simply priceless. Well, at Sotheby's Auction House, the world's oldest and most complete Hebrew Bible just sold for $38.1 million US. The winning bid on Wednesday was made by Alfred H. Moses, a former U.S. ambassador and president of the American Jewish Committee. He said he will be giving it to the Anu Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, the price of this Bible surpasses the $30.8 million paid in 1994 for Leonardo da Vinci's Codex Leicester manuscript. Well, it's great to see our air quality improve somewhat here in Lethbridge with all of the wildfires, but we're not out of the woods just yet. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. It was so great to see some blue sky earlier today in many parts of southwestern Alberta once again. The wildfire smoke has been impacting the air quality of so many regions across the province. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, even though the air quality index dropped to about 2 earlier today, the special air quality statement continued from Environment Canada.
Yeah, true, Hal, and I will tell you why. So air quality and visibility can actually fluctuate over short distances and can vary considerably from hour to hour. So it is hard to predict with any degree of accuracy just how bad it could get over the course of a day. Also keep in mind that wildfire smoke can be harmful to everyone's health, even at low concentrations. So that's why that health index risk is still in effect. Now, we are expected to see a scorcher on Friday, but it could be accompanied by some showers and a risk of a thunderstorm. We're also could see some showers later on in the week. We're looking at Monday night right through Wednesday. But other than that, 31 degrees for our high on Friday as we start that long weekend. High of 28 on Saturday, 31 degrees on Sunday. I wonder if that will be a record breaker. 21 on Monday. Look at that. We're just fluctuating there by 10 degrees, but still plenty of sunshine. And then that's when the showers begin Monday evening right through Wednesday. We're looking at high of 20 degrees on Tuesday and 19 on Wednesday. But even with that, we're still looking at higher than our average high for this time of year, which is 19 degrees, average low 5 degrees. 31 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 2006, and the record low was -3, and that happened back in 1965. So the sun rose this morning at 5:43 a.m. We're looking at a sunset this evening at 9:14, giving us 15 hours and 31 minutes now of daylight. Okay, it's going to be a sunny one on the west coast tomorrow, looking at 22 degrees in Victoria, more like 18 though, the closer you are to the water. are also 40 kilometer per hour winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait. High of 22 in Vancouver, but inland looking at 28 degrees, also a very high humidex there. Humidex is 29 for Vancouver. Edmonton looking at 27, sunny skies, and Calgary also looking at a high of 27 tomorrow, looking at 60% chance of showers, risks of a thunderstorm. I also have to note that those risk advisories are in effect still for Calgary and Edmonton, even though they were sitting at low and moderate risks today with that health index. Not so much for the rest of the prairie. Saskatoon and Regina had their air quality indexes lifted today, looking at a high of 25 tomorrow with mainly sunny skies. Clear skies also expected tomorrow in Regina, high of 20. 21 expected for a high in Winnipeg tomorrow with clear skies as well. And their health advisory was lifted as well. So I'm thinking that rain in Winnipeg probably helped out quite a little bit. Toronto looking at a chance of showers tomorrow, high of 21 degrees. 21 also expected in Ottawa, and a lovely high of 25 degrees tomorrow in Montreal with clear skies. Okay, so in the Maritimes, we're looking at a frost advisory in effect for Fredericton, Halifax, and Charlottetown. So fruit trees, vegetable plants, other types of crops could be affected in those frost-prone areas. Looking at a high of 23 tomorrow in Fredericton, 15 for a high in Halifax, high of 16 in Charlottetown. Clear skies all the way across that, including St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 13 degrees, but 30 to 50 K winds in most of these cities. So it's going to be sunny but windy out in the Maritimes tomorrow. There you have it. That is your forecast.
More than 90 WestJet flights have been canceled as talks with the pilots union are at a critical impasse. The federal labor minister and mediator, WestJet CEO and union leaders are all at a hotel in Toronto working towards a deal before Friday's strike deadline. Around 1,800 pilots at the carrier and its Swoop subsidiary are ready to walk off the job, demanding better job security, better pay, and scheduling. Canada Goose is reporting a $3.1 million loss in its fourth quarter. Now that compares with a $9.1 million loss a year earlier as revenue rose more than 30%. The luxury parka maker says revenue in the fourth quarter totaled around $293 million. That is up from roughly $223 million in the same quarter last year. You know, sometimes tensions in the workplace may have a little to do with an age gap between coworkers. That's according to Dr. Tim Elmore, CEO of Growing Leaders and author of the book New Kind of Diversity. Dr. Elmore says a huge diversity of ages can sometimes bring serious issues.
I was at a conference just a few years ago that was the impetus for this book. I was talking to CEOs after this event on conflict resolution, and they were still wondering why they were sensing so much conflict when it wasn't between departments or just personnel. And they came to the conclusion that it was the different generations they had on their team. They had Generation Z, they had millennials, they had Xers, they had boomers, they even had a couple of builder generation folks. And it was like an epiphany hit them. The diversity they were sensing really was the different values and communication styles that these different generations brought to the team.
Dr. Elmore will have more on age diversity problems and solutions in the workplace coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up just under a point today to finish at 20,297. The Dow was up 115 points to 33,535. The S&P 500 was up 39 on the day to 4198, and the Nasdaq was up 188 points to 12,688. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 97 cents to 71.86 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 23 cents to 2.59 U.S. Gold was down 7 cents to 1957.48 U.S. an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 23.49 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.02 per bushel, barley's at $8.82, canola's at $16.06, and corn is at $9.85 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 70 cents to $165.53. Feeder cattle were up $1.55 to $206.10, and lean hogs June contract was up 43 cents to $85.30. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 74.06 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, more than 90 WestJet flights have been canceled as talks with the pilots union are at a critical impasse. The federal labor minister and mediator, WestJet's CEO and union leaders are all at a hotel in Toronto working towards a deal before Friday's strike deadline. Around 1,800 pilots at the carrier and its Swoop subsidiary are ready to walk off the job, demanding better job security, better pay, and scheduling. You know, the Alberta election is less than 2 weeks away. Coming up, we chat with the UCP Tabor-Warner candidate, Grant Hunter, who says the claims that the NDP made about Albertans having to pay to see a doctor are simply not true. He will explain why momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
The Alberta provincial election is almost here, taking place on May the 29th. Our guest today is Grant Hunter, the incumbent UCP candidate for Tabor-Warner. Welcome to Bridge City News. Grant, great to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So can you maybe tell us a bit about yourself and why you've decided to run for re-election once again?
Well, like I said, like I was telling you before, I have run for 2 terms now, so this is 8 years for me. But I'm working on a very important project for Southern Alberta. I've worked on building an agri-food processing corridor between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. We have 70% of Canada's irrigation land right in Southern Alberta. And our government has recognized the value of that and recognized that we can actually do more. So we've increased the irrigation acres by 230,000 irrigated acres. It's the largest expansion in Alberta history. We're twinning Highway 3 between Tabor and Burdett. We're going to actually finish twinning the Highway 3 all the way from BC border to the Saskatchewan border. So there's some big things that are happening in Southern Alberta. We think that as we build this, in fact, we know that when we build this, that agri-food processing companies will come, and the ones that are there already will expand. As you saw, McCain's expanded $600 million expansion, the largest that they've had in their history right here in Southern Alberta.
Wow. Okay. In your writing, what are you hearing from with your constituents? What are their biggest issues?
Well, probably the biggest issue that I'm hearing right now is affordability. Inflation has driven up the price of everything, and so this is obviously concerning for everybody, especially for people who are on fixed incomes like senior citizens or people who are on AISH. This can be a big problem for them.
Yeah, definitely. I would imagine the carbon tax also is still a big concern for many farmers and ranchers in your writing. That's kind of right where you are. So how would you address that?
Well, we would like to see the carbon tax gone. The Premier and many of us have stated that the carbon tax does not help. As you know, across the border in the United States, they don't have a carbon tax. And so we have companies that like Atlantic Sugar, that they produce sugar, and it's a commodity that's sold all over the world. And so they're price takers, not price makers. And so what happens is Atlantic Sugar takes a look across the border and says, you know, why would we still be up here in Canada where we're being punished on a carbon tax? Now, remember that the federal Trudeau government has said they want to increase that carbon tax to $170 a ton. And that is going to be very punitive to our businesses. We think that that the carbon tax should be gone, but if it isn't gone, at least that they should not be charging carbon tax on those producers that are having to deal with issues all over or having to sell their product all over the world.
Okay, and obviously, Grant, healthcare concerns continue to be a huge, one of the biggest, I think, that we're hearing, one of those biggest issues among Albertans. So I'd like to maybe chat about this for a minute. So the NDP is suggesting that a UCP government would mean people would have to pay out of pocket to see a doctor. So can you maybe address this?
Sure. It's unfortunate the NDP are actually stooping to that kind of campaign. We will not ever be charging Albertans to go to see their doctor. That will not happen. It's against the law to do that. Our Premier Smith has just signed a $24 billion agreement with the federal government in terms of health transfers back into Alberta, 10-year agreement, reaffirming our commitment to the Canada Health Act, which says that you cannot do that. And it's unfortunate the NDP are stooping to this kind of a level in order to try to win an election. It scares our seniors. It scares people who are so reliant on the healthcare system. And unfortunately, that's what they've been doing. So no, that's not going to happen. We have spent $2 billion since 2019 on our healthcare system, an extra $2 billion in our healthcare system, adding another 6,000 Alberta Health Services workers, over 700 new physicians, 1,800 new RNs, an extra 300 paramedics. So this is the sort of thing that you need to do to be able to make sure that the healthcare system is robust and it's timely and good healthcare for Albertans.
And like you were saying, of course, there's those countless negative ads out there that the NDP are producing against UCP, and they seem to be replaying these small sound bites of Danielle Smith during her podcast days, talking about that particular subject, right? So, do you feel that this is all? Do you think that it's being taken out of context? Or how is the party sort of responding to these ads?
Yeah, certainly it's taken out of context. From what I understand, well, first of all, Danielle Smith was a talk show host. And so they are, talk show hosts are provocative. They want to be able to address issues that maybe are provocative. And so they talk about issues like this. But in this situation, from what I understand, she was talking about health spending accounts and how those health spending accounts would be able to actually address some of the concerns that people can't normally get with a universal healthcare system.
Oh, interesting. That's good. Thank you for clearing that up then. Okay, so staying on healthcare for a moment, there's been some big announcements here in Lethbridge regarding the Chinook Hospital and the new cath lab. But one concern is that primary care in rural Alberta, like where you are, doesn't have enough staffing. So any idea on how to improve this situation, Grant?
Well, so in rural Alberta, it is tough to be able to keep doctors, and that's one of the problems that we face. I know that down in Milk River that we've faced some major issues trying to be able to keep doctors there. But there's innovation within our Alberta Health Services, and the innovation that we've been able to apply there in Milk River is rather than doing a fee for service. Where doctors do a fee for service in Milk River, they're actually going to do what's called an ARP, which is done in Tabor. And so basically the doctor, whether they see 5 people or 50 people, they're going to be paid the same amount. So we're going to have 2 doctors out there. They're going to be on contract, and they're not going to worry about having to see a large amount of people to be able to actually make their payroll. And to be able to earn their money. So that's going to actually help out in the Milk River area. But the other thing that we've done is a couple of years ago, we actually added a new stream, a $10 million stream specifically for rural Albertans that want to become doctors. Because we know one thing, that if they're from rural Alberta, they're more than likely willing to go back to rural Alberta. They'll have uncles and aunts and family members back in rural Alberta. And so we think that that's probably the best long-term fix that we can do to be able to help increase the amount of doctors in rural Alberta.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, that is one of the biggest complaints that we're hearing is having that shortage of doctors and the wait time for surgery, for medical tests, all of that. And I'm sure that the UCP also has a unique perspective on that, just even province-wide.
Sure. And look, in terms of the wait time on medical tests, that is something that we're working on. These sorts of things do happen. And I think that what Danielle Smith did, Premier Smith did in terms of being able to bring in Dr. Cowell, who's the administrator now for Alberta Health Services, is we've actually seen things move fairly quickly in terms of fixing things. Dr. Cowell, in the work that he's done in terms of being able to decrease the time in surgical wait times, because of the work that he's doing in terms of being able to utilize more OR spaces throughout the province and being able to bring on chartered surgical facilities, which are run by surgeons and owned by surgeons. This has actually helped decrease that wait list by 3,000 per month. So we're within months of being able to decrease that wait list that we've been seeing, that persistent wait list that we've been seeing over the last, since COVID.
Okay, wow, interesting. Okay, and of course, Grant, the UCP has been getting a fair bit of negative media coverage on the topic of education as well as healthcare. So do we need more teachers in schools? Is the curriculum appropriate, and will the rights of parents be respected? What's going on there?
We've tried to have the balance of being able to make sure that the rights of parents are respected. The United Conservative government has, I think, done more for helping to keep that parental part of education, as we know. It's even in the Declaration, UN Declaration of Human Rights, that parents have a right to be able to decide what education their children have. And we have certainly. In fact, we changed the preamble of one of our bills to be able to state that parents do have that right to be able to decide what kind of education their children have. So we have a plethora of different options for parents to be able to educate their children in Alberta, and we're actually proud of that. And we think that actually helps all of our education system. And our public education system, they do an amazing job. I started out as a teacher. My first job when I graduated was as a teacher for a couple of years, and I recognize that they have to wear many hats. And so I take my hat off to teachers for the amazing job that they do to be able to help our children, especially during COVID. It was tough for them not being able to go to school. And so there were some real deficiencies there, but we also tried to address that, where we provided extra funding for school boards to be able to actually help the kids increase their learning.
Okay, so you were a teacher, so you have a unique perspective there, and I agree with you. Hats off to teachers 100%. What a hard job that is, certainly, especially during COVID. And I feel for the kids, too, as well, going through all of this. But do you think that we need more teachers? I feel like there's a lot of overcrowding in the classrooms, and especially with new people coming into the province. And I feel like maybe the amount of teachers isn't increasing compared to the amount of kids. That ratio is sort of off.
I wouldn't say so. I would say that we actually do have, first of all, it's a good problem to have people starting to move into your province again.
Yeah.
Remember that during the NDP's 4 years, there was 13 quarters where we had net migration out of the province. Because we brought back the Alberta Advantage, we've actually been able to see that net migration coming into the province again. So we're adding, in the last couple of years, we've added like the size of Lethbridge to the population of Alberta. And so with that, we're going to need to build more hospitals, more schools, hire more teachers, hire more doctors, hire more nurses. Those are good problems to have, but we certainly have the budget to be able to do that. Because we've balanced the budget, we now have the ability to be able to actually do the expansion, not on the backs of our children and grandchildren by adding debt. And that's something that I think that Albertans need to remember is that when the NDP were in, they added $70 billion of debt onto Albertans' backs, our children and grandchildren's backs. That's more than all of the premiers and all of the governments prior to the NDP. Just to put that in perspective.
Right. And then, of course, when I talk to people from the NDP, they say that they inherited it.
Actually, they didn't inherit any. We had no debt. In fact, not only that, I sat on Treasury Board for 3.5 years, so I know the numbers. We also saw that they burned through about $12 billion of the rainy day fund that was there as well. They did never say that to anybody. So not only the $70 billion that they added in debt, there's about $12 billion as well that they burnt through, which was that rainy day fund that Ralph Klein put together.
Wow. Okay. On the taxation front, what are the UCP plans for that? Are taxes on the way up, on the way down? Are they staying the same?
Yeah, we actually, first announcement that the Premier made was to decrease taxes. It's always a good thing when we can actually have people keep more money in their own pockets. So it's a reduction. So it's actually changing the tax structure from 10% to 8%. So we're adding a new tax bracket to 8%. So anybody making $60,000 or less, there will be an 8% tax on that. Now, the nice thing about that is that those people are going to be able to save about 20% on their tax bill. But everybody else will also save, because as you know, you get taxed on that first $60,000, X amount of dollars, and it will be at the 8% tax bracket. So everybody is going to save about $760 on their taxes. So you know what? These are the little things that we're trying to do to be able to help with that affordability issue, because it has really affected people. And I think that it really matters when we can keep more money in the pockets of people.
Yeah, I do remember that big announcement on right after the writ dropped, of course, and also I think there was a fuel tax holiday as well that she was giving.
Yeah, which is great. We've had that for some time now. 13 cents that is normally added to the provincial tax on a liter of gas. We took that off, and we are continuing to keep that off. It would be great if the federal government would take off the 14 cents that they have on there with the carbon tax. I think that would really help not just Albertans, but all Canadians. And we've asked them to do that, but they refuse to do it.
It looks like we are about out of time here, but thanks so much for being with us today, Grant.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Appreciate having you on. Grant Hunter is the incumbent UCP candidate for Tabor-Warner.
You may have noticed that the North American workforce is experiencing perhaps the most disruptive shift we have ever seen. The pandemic saw millions of people work remotely, and many still do work from home. Now, as employers and employees, how do we address the so-called new normal? Dr. Tim Elmore is the CEO of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta, Georgia-based nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. He's also author of the book called A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. Dr. Elmore, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to have you on. Now, how would you best describe your book?
Well, the book really is about the diversity we're seeing, but it's a kind of an elephant in the room. I think we readily talk about ethnic diversity, and we should, and gender diversity and income diversity. But I was at a conference just a few years ago that was the impetus for this book. I was talking to CEOs after this event on conflict resolution, and they were still wondering why they were sensing so much conflict when it wasn't between departments or just personnel. And they came to the conclusion that it was the different generations they had on their team. They had Generation Z, they had millennials, they had Xers, they had boomers, they even had a couple of builder generation folks. And it was like an epiphany hit them. That the diversity they were sensing really was the different values and communication styles that these different generations brought to the team. Well, that set me on a hunt. I was on a search now. How can we better help these organizations, these schools, these nonprofits, these businesses better build bridges between these generations rather than walls, which we tend to naturally build. If we see a young person that is so different and so odd, we tend to just put up walls rather than bridges. So the book is about how do we build bridges rather than walls between these generations.
Now, we'll talk about some of the generational gaps and how we're building the bridges in just a moment here, Dr. Elmore. But let's talk about working remotely as well. Do you find that the millennials were more easily adaptable in that regard than maybe some of the Generation Xers or baby boomers?
Absolutely. In fact, we saw something quite interesting. Yes, they were way more adaptable to the technology that was needed to work virtually, but it was the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, that were most hungry to come back. And I think it was because they needed to build the social capital that maybe boomers had built for decades already. They were saying, hey, fine, I'm good here. So it was a very interesting mixture of, I know how to do this technology, but I need to be building the social capital that only comes sometimes with face-to-face interactions.
Now, you're right that the generation gap, which is first noticed in the 1960s, has really widened today. And you say it has made collaboration and synergy on a team more challenging than ever. What are some of the bigger challenges that people in the workplace are facing today?
Yeah, well, the best way I can probably respond to this in a short amount of time would be to say, I think the same work that we put into a cross-cultural or cross-cultural interaction is the same work we're going to need to put into a person from a very different generation. So Hal, you and I both know if we got on a plane and flew to China right now, we would psych ourselves up to work hard after we landed at interacting and connecting with those people there, because they speak different language, they have different customs, they have different values. Bingo. I think when I walk into my office and I see a 22-year-old and I'm 62, I got to go, okay, there's going to be some work here. It's worth it, but it's going to be work. And I think sometimes we're just lazy, if I can be honest, socially lazy. Sometimes we have egos that get in the way of our learning from perhaps a person from a very different generation. So the hardships come when we're not really willing to put in the work that we know is necessary to really build that that connection.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the term lazy, because in my family, some of the baby boomers look at the millennials as being lazy, unmotivated. What are you contributing to society? Where the millennials look at the boomers and say, yeah, okay, boomer, whatever. You know, so there's that, almost seems like a disrespect. And us as the Generation X, you know, I've got the millennial kids. I'm like, whoa, easy guys, come on, let's relax here. Like, can't we all just get along? So how do we kind of try and bridge that gap?
Yeah, that is in essence is the issue here. Let me share a quick story. Maggie and Antonio worked together. Maggie is the hiring manager. Antonio was a 24-year-old when this story happened. And he interviewed well. She decided to hire him. He had a great work ethic, it seemed. But Antonio wore a long sleeve shirt that day. And Maggie went through the fact that at this particular company, there were no tattoos allowed. They felt like it might be off-putting to some of their older customers. But Antonio didn't fess up that he had a tattoo. So a few weeks into his job, he's got a short sleeve shirt on, and here's this gigantic tattoo, which you and I would say, okay, that's all right. But Maggie went, why do you have that? Why didn't you tell me at the interview that you had it? Well, suddenly he felt attacked. This is part of my very identity, you know, this, you know, and oftentimes with younger generations, their look is part of their identity, the piercing, the tattoo. Well, this started a 5 or 6 meeting interaction that did not go well most of the time, because Antonio felt attacked and Maggie felt like he wasn't being honest and it didn't have integrity. But let me tell you why I'm telling you this story. Maggie ended up finding a resolve. She said, Antonio, you're a great worker. I don't want to lose you on this team. But if I just let this go, I'm communicating to every other team member, you have to hold a standard, but Antonio didn't have to hold his standard. And that doesn't work well. So the two of them stood in front of the entire team. Antonio apologized in front of everybody that he had not been forthright and honest and so forth. Maggie said, hey, we all love this guy, don't we? We don't want to lose him. So he agreed to wear long sleeves from that point on. Maggie called corporate headquarters and said, could you consider maybe looking at this policy again? But everybody gave him a standing ovation that they had found a meeting in the middle. Somehow they'd come to some compromise where they were able to still look as though they were doing what they valued, but yet Antonio got to stay. I'm bringing this up because I think far too often we come to this divide where we feel like we're violating a principle, perhaps, or some core thing. And if we are, we shouldn't violate it. But Maggie put relationships first, and she found a way where both parties could actually work together in this setting. I think that's what we're going to have to do more and more as time marches forward.
So what are some of the key questions leaders really need to be asking at better closing the generation gap outside of, do you have any ink?
Yeah. Well, there's a few that I've been having to ask. I am in my 60s now, and so my career started more than 40 years ago. I would say one question is, am I willing to be a mentor? Now, that's not a real word. It's a combination of mentor and intern. So am I willing to pour into this generation that perhaps needs some timeless values and skills, but am I willing also to put that intern hat on when I need to learn something that I haven't picked up in the last 40 years, but it's new today, and they know it intuitively? So that would be one. Am I willing to be a teacher and a learner? And I love the term. Chip Conley came up with this term years ago, mentor. I feel like maybe that's the tip of the iceberg where every other question is going to fall under. Am I teachable, even as an older veteran of the workforce?
You know, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been in this crazy industry over 30 years as a broadcast journalist. I work as the news director here, and I learn a lot from our young journalists that are coming through college, things that they can teach me, and at the same time, I can share some of my experiences with them.
Right. I love that.
How can a leader really connect employees in a way that will allow that really to happen, that we can learn from each other and keep those doors open?
Yeah. So the number one enemy of what you just asked, Cal, is stereotyping. We don't know that we do it, but we naturally do it. Our brains create files. We have to have files to keep everything in order up there. So we see someone say a particular phrase or do a certain activity, and we go, I know what you are. I know who you are. And we stereotype. So to fight that, I've got 3 simple but big ideas. The first one is humility. I have to approach every interaction with any age with humility. That means I can speak as if I believe I'm right, but I must listen as if I believe I'm wrong. That's huge for me. That's a game changer when I meet with 20-somethings or 30-somethings. So number 2 is respect. I know that's an age-old term, and you folks in Canada seem to do it better than we in America, but I think we've just got to exude and find ways to demonstrate I respect you, even though I'm very different than. We don't have to not be different. Difference is beautiful. We need the differences, but I need to respect you. And then the third big idea is curiosity. If I can stay curious into my 40s and 50s and 60s, oh my gosh, that keeps me in a different frame of mind. And I'm ready to hear from anybody and everybody along the way to get better. So those would be the concepts that I would share on that one.
Do you find sometimes, too, with the generational gap, that it's harder sometimes for people to agree to disagree?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we're in a very difficult time right now where we're just polarized, it seems like, on so many issues. It's unnecessary. So yeah, I think that, here's my theory. I think the generation gap has gotten bigger, not just because of the polarization, but because the screens in our life went from public to private. So when I was growing up, there was one screen in our house. It was a TV. We all gathered around and watched we called it a program together, and we laughed together, listened together, talked about it afterwards. But today, we've got this smart device in our hand, and it's a private thing. I've got an echo chamber, and I'm interacting with people that are probably my age, that think like me, vote like me, and it's not helpful. So once the screens went to private, now we've got these silos we've got to break out of, and it's going to require that work that I described earlier, that we're going to have to reckon I'm willing to do that work.
So what can we really learn from each other to help us grow as individuals, right? Now, John Maxwell has said before that managers treat everyone the same, but leaders treat everyone differently. Tell me about this idea of chess versus checkers in leadership and how that really plays into the way that leaders should treat other people.
Yeah. So in this book, I offer 6 metaphors or 6 images that start conversations. We believe pictures really are worth 1,000 words. So chess and checkers are both games that are played on the very same game board. So we could be tempted to think, must be the same game. Not true. When I play the game of checkers, all my pieces look alike, they all move alike, so I treat them all alike. In chess, if I have any hope of winning the game, I have to know what each piece can do. That a knight goes up 2 and over 1, and a bishop does this, and a pawn, and a rook, and a king, and a queen. Only in knowing the strength of each piece can I win. I think mediocre leaders, parents, managers play checkers with their people. They treat them all alike, and they get average performance. Great leaders do the work to play chess in the relationships of their life, and they connect with others at the uniqueness of their strength, their personality, and their generation. And those people flourish under the leadership. By the way, isn't this true in our homes? If we have more than one child, they're probably very different, even though they're eating the same meals under the same roof. We've got to play chess rather than checkers. So that's a big idea that I think will enable us to connect with the different generations around us.
How about building up team morale, maybe doing some team bonding and trying some interesting activities that will really close the generation gap on a team? Any suggestions?
Yeah, sure do. One is finding someone that you know is very different. Let's say a different generation, 20-something, I'm 50-something or 60-something. And I play the game. Well, it's not a game, but it's just an interaction called Tell Me About Your Superpower. I have noticed that all generations bring strengths, different strengths to the team. Think about it. The boomer generation brings stories and experience and coaching that they have to offer. Xers bring this pragmatism that they got when they were growing up in a very difficult time in the 70s and 80s. Millennials bring this confidence with them and this hope and idealism. Gen Z brings this hacker mindset and this entrepreneurship that they bring with them as a generation. So if I ask the question, well, first, let's swap stories. We're going to find something common in our stories somewhere, but then share with me your superpower and I'll share with you mine. Almost always the superpowers are derived from who we are and the generation from which we come. So that would be one activity that I think has really helped us at Growing Leaders. We're doing that here, and it's been so fun to see people get to know each other in an unusual way and then glean from each other.
So what's your superpower?
Well, I think mine really is the coaching that I bring. My brain has gone from fluid to crystallized, and this is the 43rd year of my career. So I can tell you back here, this is what we learned from this, and back here is what we learned from that. And I think now, instead of just being a history teacher in my office, I've got to be the one that says, let me give you a couple of really good questions to ask, because we did try that in 2004, and here's what happened. But yet I don't want to rain on the parade. You know how that goes. It's, well, we tried that and it didn't work, so forget it. So I think that's kind of mine. Now, we're obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, one of my favorite practices, Hal, is reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is a topic that Jack Welch brought up at General Electric way back in the 1990s. This is where an older generation person and a younger generation person get together. They do swap stories, but this time they're each going to mentor each other in what they bring to the table. So the senior veteran's going to say, here's how to succeed at this organization. I've learned it. But the young person may say, here's how to monetize the latest app I just got on my phone, or how to use it for marketing at this company. And I have no idea how to do that. So like you learn from those younger if you're open. And I'm telling you, reverse mentoring, every week I sit at that table to my left, and I'm meeting with Andrew, who's 30 years younger than me. I'm meeting with Cam, who's 40 years younger than me. And I learn every single time.
Yeah, you keep learning and you keep growing. I love that. Dr. Tim Elmore is the author of A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. Thanks so much for joining us today from Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Hal. It's great to be with you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.